Hey, we're back with another episode of Real Estate Fanatics, and today we're going to talk about how do I work with investors? What do I need to know? How do I need to work with them? What am I looking for? Not all investors are created the same, so I want to definitely talk about those things today, and we'll use some of our expertise and knowledge to give you some brief guidance around that. However, before we begin, hit the subscription button down below, click the notification bell for us. Also, put some comments in there, like our videos if you would, please. Also, if you want to talk to me about anything, if any of this investor stuff rings a bell to you, if you have more questions on it, if you want to know any of our systems, any of our processes, any of our anything, man, we are an open book. Hit the Calendly link down below. Our schedules are pretty busy, so that's the best way to get in touch with us and schedule a 30-minute conversation with us. It can be about literally anything. All right, so you want to work with real estate investors. How do you work with real estate investors? What are you looking for? Well, here's kind of a few tips and tricks on that. So really understanding more about the real estate investors. Here's one thing, and I'm an investor as well, not at a super high level, but enough that I understand how it works. Most investors are looking for off-market properties. That's the flat reality of it. They're very difficult, at least the experienced ones are very difficult to tie together with one agent, because being under an agreement with one agent limits their ability to find properties that 10 other agents in their network might find. So they're really usually more of a contract to contract. So if you find them a property and you bring that to their attention, then they absolutely will normally sign an agreement with you to do business on that particular property. But they're not going to probably tie their hands up into a 6-month buyer's agency to only use you, because if another realtor finds an off-the-market property, they're probably not going to be super happy that they have to give all their commissions on the buy side to another agent, right? So I look at that from knowing the investors and just how their mindsets work. The more the merrier. That's why you probably, if you've been in real estate, you're seeing lots of spam messages come from investors, because they're just trying to find opportunities. Think of big businesses that like Black Knight and some other things like that are out there. They have boots on the ground everywhere looking for properties that they can find value on. iBuyer programs, you name it, is some of those games as well. So the next thing I look at is to scrub and scrutinize the investor. I interview them as much as they interview me, because investors, let's just give you an example. Investor 1 comes out of school. He's taught like these methods of what is the aftermarket repair value, right? What does those things need to look like? A lot of times the school version of what's happening and what they need to shoot for doesn't match today's environment or market. Let's look at like 2010 to 2000, or maybe 2012, 13, specifically maybe more like 2018 to 2021. If you were trying to find like these 50% ARVs, you weren't going to happen, right? The market was too hot. I mean, things were selling super high. The profit margins were super, super thin, generally speaking, for investors. Now you look at recent times, and inflation on after repair values are going up because the cost to do the work is going up, right? So investors that are smart and savvy in this game really have their numbers dialed in. You have to do that as well. If you want to really have the respect of working with investors, you got to understand terms like cash on cash. You got to understand terms like cap rates. You got to understand 1031 exchanges and how those things function and operate and work. There's just a lot of terminology and things you need to know. A lot of time real estate agents are just like, yeah, I want to work with investors. Well, cool. I want to work with everybody too that wants to do business, but am I the right person with the right experience and the right knowledge to do that? Maybe, maybe not, right? You have to go in and take classes and training, maybe work with some investors, but the more that you get to know knowledge-wise, the more valuable you become to them. Also, the more influence you have in success in real estate also makes you're a more wanted person as well, because investors will go, oh, well, shoot, Mike and their team sold 200 homes. The likelihood of the number of people they have on the ground for looking for opportunities is probably somebody we want to connect with as an investor, because they might be able to find some off-market properties for us just because of the sheer numbers of properties that they do, so on and so forth. So I think those are the critical components. Really what you want to do, and one thing that I've always said is, once you progress through real estate and you have the financials to do it, I tell you what, I tell a lot of my investors, and that's why I don't always do a great job of working with investors, that I'm an investor too. So if I find a property, I should be going into a lot of my listings as, do I want to buy this property as an investor? Now there's obviously things you have to do, like you can't obviously go in and steer a client into a position or anything like that. So there's some ways to do business as an investor and a real estate agent, and there are bad ways to do it. You have to understand you're always there to take care of the consumer, but if you present the opportunity such that, hey, you can get this much on the market, we believe in a professional comp opinion, I'm willing to give you this much, kind of, as long as you're clear in that and it's documented in that way, generally you're going to be okay in that capacity. Or worst case is get another agent to represent them, and then that way you have different agencies signed, if you will. So a couple different ways to do that, but there are some illegal ways to do that, so be very cautious of this conversation as I talk about it. Talk with your managing broker on how to do those things appropriately. But with that being said, I go in and look at, I'm an investor all the time too. So if somebody's like, hey, need to sell my house, and I'm like, cool, comps would suggest this. If we go open market, as an investor, I'm willing to pay this. Here's the pros and cons to both of those scenarios. Which do you choose? Cool, we go with it. If they want to drive it for the highest price possible, then I represent them as a listing agent, and we go seek a buyer for them. If they're willing to pay the numbers that make sense for an investor like myself to purchase, then I'm good with that. We move forward and we purchase the home. However, if I'm not interested in it, or they definitely don't want to sell it to me for what I feel like I need to do on the deal, then we will turn around and look at our investor pool and work with them. So having a list of investors is important, but also kind of circling back to identifying and interviewing the investors, is we get a lot that come out of school, and what they want you to do is find numbers that don't exactly exist in the market. So you're constantly doing a lot of research, a lot of stuff because remember, our job, we don't get paid until something gets to the closing table. So you have to be careful of how much time do you spend supporting an investor that may or may not ever do a deal, and they also have no allegiance to one individual agent usually, and so they're not going to sign an agency with you typically. So just being cautious of that. As you know your investors, the serious ones, you definitely will do more work for them, especially if they're committed to use you if you find something. That's always important. Kind of just looking at different things around that investor world is just being out there and knowing a bunch of properties, being a student of the game by doing a lot of showings especially when you're newer. And schedule a lot of showings, especially on vacant homes. I don't try to necessarily inconvenience sellers, but if there's vacant homes, I'll schedule showings, just go out and see if I can learn the market. Like, hey, what does this person think this house is worth? Let's go walk through it and see, so on and so forth. So going back to what I really like to do is try to go in and assume that I'm going to try to buy the house if it makes sense. But if the numbers don't make sense for either side, then we move forward and we do the transaction. But that's just a mental change in how you do some business. And investors are can be a little bit fickle. Like why I do like working with investors is they're very numbers driven. There's not emotions in it. It's really a numbers game. So if they move forward with the deal, they're probably closing on the deal unless there's any boogeymans in the closet kind of thing on inspection and things like that. But most experienced investors are walking through the house going, all right, I can see the toilet's broke. I can see that the disposal's broke, right? These are things I can factor in my offer such that I won't beat them up on inspection, or I'm not going to probably blow the deal up over versus somebody who's buying a home to live in, right? It's very numbers driven. It's very much factual. Again, not a lot of emotions in it. If the deal makes sense, they move forward with it. If they don't, then they just terminate and move on, right? So just different ways of different people that you work with. So it's very interesting. I do enjoy working with the right investors, shall I say, just because there's not a lot of emotions, but I also enjoy working with people who have a desire to move into their home and have that as their family, right, where their family lives. So, all right, well, hope that helps. If you have any questions, comments, hit me up. There's a Calendly link right here. Happy to talk about anything that you desire, whether it's around investors or not. Hit our subscription button down below and our notification bell, put some comments in. Happy to give you any marketing material we have around investors. Happy to let you know how our ISAs are working with investors, you name it, right? Happy to share any and all of that with you. Thanks.